families expect from it when they go back to school?
You know, this is the beginning piece of sharing a pretty extensive plan, and tonight is an overview to kind of talk about the big components of the plan. And then what we'll be doing from there is sharing more detailed information, both with our staff as well as the community. Because as we all know, this is a situation that's still unfolding. There's still details, and our guidance changes even from day to day. And so what we're doing is digesting and getting the very best guidance that we have, and then putting that into operational practice, which is really where the detailed work happens. You know, we talk about different processes and things, and that looks a little different in every school and every classroom, depending on that school facility. And we also know that this is just a topic that a lot of people are thinking about in very different ways right now. Some are very happy to think about coming back to school, and others may be concerned for a wide variety of reasons. They may have you know, a family member who's already been affected by COVID. They may have no connection at all with somebody who's been affected by this disease. And so we're trying to be really respectful of the perceptions and the thoughts that are out there, knowing that there really is no consensus at this point. We don't see that widespread agreement with you know, some of our medical professionals, with families, with staff. And so we're trying to navigate all that as a school district while still keeping our focus on the most important thing, which is educating our students. And really the gold standard is to have our students back in class beginning August 27th. And so that's the very best case scenario. There's still a number of weeks until school starts, and we need to see what the actual viral activity in our community looks like, and things can change by then, but right now that's what we're aiming toward.
It mentions social distancing in the plan, and what I read was in the classroom. But is it possible to social distance in the hallways? What's the answer to that?
Absolutely it is. Those are some of those details that we'll still be working out, and that's a lot of process that we're going to ask our teachers and our staff members and our principals to think through, because there's different schedules. And so if you're going to take your first graders to use the restroom or go to lunch, that looks very different, helping them line up in a hallway with some distance. The American Pediatrics Association is now saying 3 to 6 feet, maybe, instead of that first 6-foot rule that we saw. And that looks different in high school. High schoolers have the ability to do that physical distancing and are already doing those things, and a lot of kids are getting used to that just being out in the community right now. And Jamie, you want to talk about detailed plans with that?
Yeah, and we're working with each of the building principals to establish some of those plans within their buildings, and so that they have that ability to know what their passing times are, what their students are able to do, and being able to work through some of the details of that. The plan tonight will really go through the big picture of things that we've worked out with our district, and really looking at each one of the categories that we have as our 4 main pillars, and to see where we can help to improve the health and those safety measures within each of the school buildings. So we'll look at that, and we'll then start our discussion with the building principals to see where can we put in additional plans within the classroom, within the building itself.
Mm-hmm.
What about when it comes to busing? How are you guys preparing to allow students to practice social distancing on bus?
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a variety of guidance out there on busing. Some of it is to put kids on like we typically would, but make sure that they're in masks. Others say if you can't do that, to physically space them out in buses. And there's a reality factor. If we want to get all kids to school, of course, it would take all day if we were to look at, you know, some of the guidance, and we don't think that's feasible either. So we're still working on those plans for transportation, but it will involve probably wearing masks and as well as physical spacing whenever possible.
And we'll work through that with the bus company. They're going to wear, their staff will wear the face coverings and the protective things that are needed there. Our staff that are on those buses will also wear those protective coverings. We're going to obviously work with the students and the parents to be able to utilize that. There's some key times in there where we're really going to look at parents to help us with their students to make sure that we keep the bus safe, the school safe, those passing times, but the bus and transportation is a key part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain more about the daily screening process that students will have to go through.
Mhm.
Yep. And right now, another piece of that encouragement is that every parent, and that's coming out through the Department of Health as well, that every parent works with their child to answer those questions before they come into the school setting. So they really need to go through those screening questions and make sure they can answer yes to each one of those. The same will happen with our staff, that our staff need to be able to go through and answer each of those questions before they come into the school setting.
In prevention is really just making sure that people are very, very diligent about sending their child to school when they are ill. We don't know what regular cold and flu season is going to look like this year, while we also have COVID in the mix, and so we're going to err hopefully on the side of caution as parents make those decisions, but we're really going to rely on people to make those good choices.
I know you mentioned that there's not necessarily a consensus on these guidelines, but the district is recommending the encouragement of face coverings and not necessarily requiring them. Can you explain the reasoning behind that decision?
Sure, I'd be happy to. When we look at the guidance, most of the guidance says strongly recommending and encouraging, knowing that whenever you say you're going to require something, you have to have a level of enforcing that. We are a public entity. We serve the public. We serve children. And we want to make sure that children can access a free and appropriate public education. We're going to make every effort to have students and staff wearing masks, but there may be reasons why somebody is unable to or may not be recommended for them to wear it. You also have the realities of children. They may take a mask off, they may forget. We'll have supplies so that nobody should go without one, and there's personal choice involved. The bottom line is I hope it is everyone's intention to help us bring kids back to school and keep them in school so that we don't have to return to that remote learning environment. I don't think anybody loved what that looked like and felt like. And we know that we have children who need to be in school for health and safety reasons, and primarily we have lost learning that we need to make up. So we are going to do our best to provide supplies. We're going to be working with parents and families if they choose to have their child wear their own face coverings. We're going to help with the procedures and working that into routines and procedures and how we do that. There may be times where kids and staff are able to remove them if it's safe or if you're physically distanced. And so those are all part of those details. But to say we're going to require it may mean to some that we're going to have disciplinary measures for children and for staff, and we don't want that to be the perception. We want the goal to be to bring everybody back, to keep them back, and to follow all of those safety guidelines, including the wearing of masks. But requiring is a very heavy word, and so we've tried to be sensitive to that. We're also going to get some additional feedback from our community and from our staff because we want to know those perceptions. I think we've all gotten emails within the same 5 minutes, it feels like at times, where we have somebody who says, please don't require my child to wear a mask, or I'm not sending them, to please make sure that you require every child to wear a mask. And that's what I mean when we don't have that consensus really from everyone. And so as a school district, it's on us to do everything that we can to bring kids back, to educate them in our classrooms, to do so safely. And we have to remember that we are a public entity and we serve the public, and there is some level of inherent risk whenever we are in public in any setting, whether it's school or the grocery store or a ball game or whatever that might be.
And I'm sure it's in the plan, but for our viewers who haven't read it, what's the process if someone does test positive? What happens with the school and the student body then?
Those details we're still working through. We're working with the Department of Health, and we waited quite a while for the Department of Health to come out with their information, and they did this past week. And really that's going to be dealt with a lot of times on a case-by-case situation, where they'll come in and assist, because not every situation is the same, where you can make a blanket statement across and say that it will happen this way, because none of that will happen the same. So we're working with the Department of Health and Molly Satter, our person here with the school district that works on that health component. And we're really looking at what's the best fit for each one of those schools, depending on what the case is. So more of that will come out. They gave some great guidance in starting that process this past week on Thursday. And so we're really going to utilize that to move forward as we make our plans for the Sioux Falls School District. So things like that we wait for information from other entities, it takes us maybe a little bit longer, but we're going to have those things in place, and a lot of it will depend on the case-by-case situation.
Are there any plans to have on-site rapid testing?
Not at this point, but that's something that we're working on, because we know part of our ability to continue having school in session is our ability to test in a short amount of time and to do any contact tracing that public health would want to do. So my hope would be that we would be able to, particularly with staff, have those tests done quickly, but we are very much still in the process of working on those plans. And the other thing is the protocols. If a student presents as ill in school, that's going to look and feel different now, and so it's those protocols that we will have in place to separate kids the way that we might need to, for contacting anyone that we would need to. But again, all that comes down to the guidance that we get from public health and working with our community partners in the medical field to help us know what's possible and what would be best practice.
When it comes to checking temperatures, is that going to be left up to the parents then to make sure that they're...
That's going to be part of that check-in process that we're going to ask parents to. And that might change, but part of that is just the feasibility of doing that with that many children on a daily basis and staff. And so we ask parents that they help us with that personal responsibility piece. And I think all of us would like to think we could maybe pull that off every morning, but we also don't want to take 3 hours to get all of our students in school, and that's where our parents are partners, and so we need them to partner with us on that piece.
And that includes staff as well? Staff will check their...
Absolutely, yes. You'll see that on many of our doorways already, that we're asking staff to do that self-check as they come in.
What is the enrollment, or what was the enrollment? What do you predict? How many students do you have?
I will defer to Dr. Nold for
We're gonna,
that.
if you're looking at the, K through 12, we're going to be just over the 24,000 mark of individual students enrolled, and then our pre-K through 12, right at that 25,000 mark. And so that's our student population coming back in, and obviously we want every one of those students to feel welcome and part of the school, and we're going to have options in there for some of our students who aren't able to come back in with that virtual academy, and so we're going to be looking at that and discuss that a little bit further tonight, and then provide that option and get that information out to our parents later this month.
Mhm.
So we're working to serve up to 25,000 students and making sure we have a place for them to come that's a safe place to gain their education.
So the virtual academy would be completely online then?
That would be, yes, that is not, and not to confuse the two, that is not remote learning like we ended this past year. It's really a virtual academy that we'll have teachers there to help and assist, but it's not where they're going to teach the absolute lesson going through. It's an online platform that'll be utilized. And I've had a lot of individuals call today and later last week just asking more about that information because they were definitely intrigued in that. So it's another option for individuals that may not have that ability to come back into a traditional setting like that. And where we're making the plans right now to keep our buildings as safe as possible and do have different interventions and processes in place, I fully understand that there's some that will need even a different option, such as the virtual academy.
I think that's one of the things we learned, whether you were in the Sioux Falls district or any other district across the country, is that going to that remote environment for a longer period of time felt clunky to very many people. And so there's some things that we're putting in place for the fall as part of the regular daily education that would also make it more feasible and smooth to transition to even a partially remote setting or full remote for hopefully what would be a short amount of time. But that's one of the things that we heard from our community, that we need to make sure that we have plans in place that helps that be a much smoother process.
Going back to changes for in-person learning, Jamie, what are some of the, or can you provide an overview of some of the physical changes that will happen in school buildings?
Yeah, and some of those things that you may not see, but there's still physical changes. We're going to be running the air longer, and that'll happen earlier in the morning, later in the day, because we want that circulation process. Some of the filtration system that we use in the school will be an improved version of that. We use the MERV 14s instead of the 11s or 10s. We're also going to install a product that will help to kill or sanitize with the bacteria or viruses, and it runs through that every 30 minutes through the air. So there's going to be a lot of things that people will see as far as the fresh air return, running that more often. which obviously will cause greater costs because you have to cool or heat that air that's coming from the outside. So there's some things that people just won't see. There's other things, such as some plexiglass in some locations, like you see in the entrance here. Some individuals that'll be wearing maybe some protective gear depending on what their position is. Some different changes like that in hallways. Or
spacing.
desks, where desks won't be. Normally, a lot of teachers love to have the desks in squares and groups. And we're going to face those desks straight forward now because that's what's recommended as we go through the CDC process. And just looking at a lot of physical changes like that, the hand sanitizer and processes that we'll use. We'll try to also minimize anybody that's coming in as potential guests or visitors into the buildings, volunteers. Some of those things we know are necessities as we help and manage our schools, but maybe not right away this fall. And we really need to see how things can start out so we make sure we start in a safe environment and move on from there.
With that in mind, can you talk a little bit about the estimated cost of these changes? It's my understanding, based on the agenda, that it may be about 7.8 million, but how that's paid for is still being determined.
And some of those dollars are dollars that we'll get through the relief funds that come through, and a significant portion of that will come through that way. And the 7.8 million, not all of that has been vetted and approved as of yet. It's all proposed dollars that would be involved there. So we still have to go through and we're managing those dollar amounts, and then we'll present that information. But a lot of that will come through, our hope and desire is through obviously relief funds that will come through. Some of those accounts we know will be there. Some we still have to make application for. There's some with the state of South Dakota we still need to complete. And we've put the applications, but we're waiting to hear back what we'll receive from that application. So those are all estimations right now. We were to do all the things that are asked for right now. And there could even be some additional expenses coming in that we're just not aware of yet here in the next month and a half. But it's really a lot of that's going to come through that relief funding, not necessarily new additional dollars on our current tax base.
But it's extensive, and I think that's one of the things that school districts everywhere are thinking about is we don't know what the actual costs are going to be because it's so many different layers. It's the protective equipment, it's the cleaning, it's classroom materials, and it's the unknown. And so, we're starting with these figures, and I don't think we know what an entire school year looks like. We also don't know fully what an enrollment picture looks like. We're hoping that all of our families return and are part of education in Sioux Falls. But those are some of the big question marks that still linger, is what really is the cost going to be.
What about when it comes to staff and teachers? Have you guys seen maybe a decrease in applications or concerns about whether teachers should return or that enough is being done to protect staff?
I think that's a question that all staff members are asking, and rightly so. This isn't something that we've done before. And I think, we all experienced what that closure looked like, which was pretty abrupt. Coming back from that after we've all kind of experienced the summer in between, and some have probably returned to full activities, whereas others may still be very much in a quarantine kind of a setting. And so we want to be able to answer their questions as much as possible. So we're going to be asking for more feedback from them. Many staff have been part of our planning, but that's not everyone because people are on break over the summer. And so that's still part of the next few weeks leading up to school. But the more questions they ask and give to us, the better we can do at answering those things. And so they have a number of ways of doing that through Let's Talk, working through their SFEA representative, their principal, and sending questions to us directly. When we all do our best work together, that's how we have a successful start to the school year. And it takes everybody's best thinking because this is more complex and detailed work than really what school districts have ever done. And it makes some of the former decisions that maybe seem difficult seem pretty simple in comparison. So we need it to be a collaborative effort. That includes the people in our community as partners with the press and the news to help us provide clear information, because people are worried and we want them to be sure of what we're doing. We want to communicate that clearly, and we want to make sure that they have the best information. Our website's going to be having updated information. We'll be sending things out to families and trying to really probably increase the frequency of that communication so people get those answers as much as possible.
What percentage do you know, staff do you have yet to fill? I mean, on a non-COVID year, will you be doing this story, you know, saying that you need math teachers for elementary or whatever? Is this a greater year to fill positions?
It is not, and even when we sent out the contracts, all but a couple of individuals had not returned the contract at that point in time, which is pretty typical. And so when they were originally sent out, they were all signed and returned back into the school district, which was good to see. And our community is a microcosm, I mean, our school district's a microcosm of our community. Some are very comfortable with that, some have a little more area of concern than others. And we see that within our community, and it's much the same with our teaching staff. Our teaching staff, the views vary greatly from one to a different, which is okay. But as far as the hiring process, as we understand, that's gone very well. There's always positions still to fill towards the end because there's sometimes some movements of individuals move due to a change of one of their spouses' positions or jobs, or may have to move with family members, whatever it may be. And so we still see some of that, no question about it. But as far as hiring and filling our positions, we're actually in a pretty good place that way. And the number of teachers that had returned their contracts and sent those back in was actually on par for what we'd see in a normal year. So those things seem to be pointing in the right direction. Now we just need to make sure that we're going through and working as best we possibly can with our community and health providers and staff and parents just to implement plans that will be in place to help to keep them safe.
And when is the final decision supposed to be made by?
Well, saying a final decision is a little tricky because there may be decisions that are made right up until school starts. And I think that's one of the hard things too, is that we don't have a plan that we say, this is it, we vote, this is done, and that's the way we go. It's a very fluid situation, and so plans will continue to evolve right up until school starts and even after it, because then we have kids in the building, we have staff return, and then we know that there will be some things that we'll need to adjust after that point as well. So I would say the plan is ongoing, and we want to be as flexible as possible, as safe as possible, with, again, that number one priority of getting our kids in school.
And one word I'll go back to quite often is pivot. We included that into a portion of that when we're looking at the different types or models of instructional delivery. And we know that we're going to have to change depending on what the situation is. And so to have a final plan, it'd be nice. We wish we could say this is absolutely it, but we know even with this current plan and over 100 pages of documentation or 150 pages of documentation, there's more to add. Because now we're starting the process with the principals and them with their staff to look at what things can we do within the building to help even make it safer yet for our students as they come in. So this will change between now and the start of the school year, and then after the school year we'll adjust things. But we at least have a little better idea of some of the things that we're going to possibly encounter from the spring, and we can utilize those experiences to make something that's a better product for this point in time.